We're having some technical difficulties. We're live. We're having some technical difficulties with Janice.
Yes.
But she'll be back in here shortly. But we've got on today's show, we've got Janice Danforth, who is the Moms for Liberty, I should say. Emphasis on the. And we are excited to have her. You know, one thing that there's a little feedback there. One thing I really appreciate about you guys and the Canadian County, I work a lot with the Canadian County chapter here, and it just cracks me up to no end how the left, demonizes you and the whole Moms for Liberty movement with, we're terrorists, we're fascists. It's just completely, it is just insane the kind of treatment that you take there.
Oh yeah, it's left and right. It's constantly, we get bombarded with attacks, and unfortunately people don't do their homework to find out why we're being called those things, and so they just believe in it. And it's unfortunate because what we're trying to do is change the direction of where public ed is going. It doesn't mean we don't want public ed or that we want to destroy it, although there's lots of things I would like to change. We want kids to be able to learn and have proficiency rates in the 90th percentile would be fantastic instead of the single digits. So that's what we want. And they are demonizing us because we're exposing things that the unions and associations don't like. And that's the reality.
Yeah. I think that's the real thing here that is so hard to grasp for so many people is I don't think a lot of parents out there really understand those percentile numbers and just how bad. I mean, when you look at supposedly great school districts like Edmond or like a Norman or Jinx or, some place like that, you would think that the majority of these kids are at like a 70 or 80 or 90 percentile in reading and math in the elementary level. And it's literally below 50%. And it's almost worse. And where do you, I mean, in the past, before you really got going with Moms for Liberty and that whole deal, like how engaged were you with knowing that kind, like the kind of data and numbers and statistics like you have now?
I mean, I wasn't. That's the unfortunate part. And I wish I had been more engaged. I do feel like there's a way that people are disengaged, and I think it's because they just don't want to know what's bad in their school. That's one thing I keep finding when we expose stuff. They say, well, that's not happening at my school. That's not happening at my school. So I found that you can't just say, here's bad books. You have to say, here's a bad book in your school, in your kid's school, not just a bad book in Oklahoma, because then they'll say, well, that's not at my kid's school. So when my kids were younger, elementary, I was very involved in their classrooms. Like I helped with reading and different things in the elementary levels. And we want to get that back. We want to get parents back engaged. I think COVID really took the parent out of the classroom, and it was really a struggle to get them back in. And at that point, people were moved on from doing that and got busy. And unfortunately, people are very busy. And then they have left the classroom again, and we want to get that engagement back.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have no idea if this is going to work or not. I think it still sounds like it's feeding back. So
no, there's no feedback. It sounds okay.
Janice, is it feeding back to you?
I hear feedback, but that's okay.
Yeah, so I have no idea. I feel bad for everybody who's watching. I have no idea why we're having this problem. We've pulled out, we've gotten back in. It's just not working today for whatever reason. So we'll try to overlook that. And that works. Okay, so now I figured it out. So the person who is talking needs to mute all the other mics. So are you hearing any feedback if I mute you guys' mics? Just do this. Okay, so that's what we'll do. So when you talk, mute everybody else's mic, or when somebody else is talking, you mute your mic. I hate to do that, but that's about the only way we can do it and let people hear what we're talking about today. So Janice, it's funny, but I've noticed just looking at you right now, you don't have a funny little mustache, on your upper lip. And so I'm starting to think maybe you're really not, Hitler like people say. I mean, is that accurate?
Is accurate. I am not a Nazi. I am not Hitler. Moms for Liberty, none of us are Nazis. None of us align with Hitler. That is just completely absurd. And the fact that any person in America actually believes that is not only ridiculous, but it's an insult to what happened during that time. And it's unfortunate that people are just so easily brainwashed and manipulated into thinking something so horrific as that, simply by a chapter chair putting a quote about Hitler, which is true. If you get control of the youth, you change what's happening. And that is exactly what's happening. And we're not the ones making the change. It's the other side. So they have to demonize us and make us the bad guy so they can continue to do that. And that's what's happened.
We were talking about this earlier before we came on. I have a big thing that I do about dark money. I've researched dark money in elections, in local elections, in Oklahoma elections. We have a huge problem with that, and I've researched it since the beginning of the elections last year. And one of the reasons why that particular situation works, why the dark money works, is because they produce these cards that come in the mail. Everybody knows what they look like. And they make up these lies, or just because it's illegal to lie on those cards, but they make up something that's just got maybe a fraction or smidgen of truth, but then they blow it out of proportion and they send it out to people. And the craziest thing happens. So I know you. I've known you over a year. You're not Hitler. You're one of the sweetest people I know. You're very intelligent. I know all these things about you. And yet I might get a card in the mail and it has your picture on it. It says, Janice Danforth thinks Hitler is great. And you're looking at that going, well, I know Janice. I've known her so is that, and that's what they do. We aren't strong enough as human beings to be able to say, I know Janice Danforth. That's not her, period, end of discussion. Because if we were, then this stuff wouldn't work. And even if you don't know Janice Danforth that well, figure out a way to call Janice Danforth or get her on the internet or send her an email or something and go, hey, Janice, I read this about you. Is this true? And then you go, well, absolutely it's not. And you guys have a discussion about it and it's done. But they win because we don't do either of the following things.
This is correct. And that's the communication piece is a big part that's missing. I think that both sides who have, especially in education, there's two perspectives on everything. There aren't conversations being had. And while some people are way out there that you probably can't have a rational conversation with, I think there are some. I think, honestly, in my personal opinion, I think the majority of teachers in Oklahoma feel and align with what we actually do, but they're afraid to come out and speak out because they get attacked by the unions and any people that are involved in that type of mentality, that mob rule, and they will just ruin them. And a lot of people just can't handle that. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot to have people calling you names on the daily is not fun. And I don't care. It doesn't affect me. And I get called everything under the sun daily and I just laugh at it. But most people, that's not an easy thing to handle. So if people would realize, or the teachers would realize, the more of them that stood up and fought against that mentality and realized that parents and teachers, if we can work together, then we will win this battle because we will take over the administrators and unions. But until that happens, it's going to be a lot harder, and flipping school board seats would be another way to help that. But there's a lot of corruption that goes on behind the scenes, unfortunately.
Well, and I can add that when I ran for school board, and still to this day, 2 years later, I still get contacted by teachers. There were a lot of teachers in my camp. They would send me, I had kind of a separate text number, and they would send me texts like on their lunch breaks or whatever. And they're like, we're behind you 100%. We want you to win. We can't say anything, they're I don't know if they're so non-confrontational or they're so afraid of just the backlash themselves coming back. But I still have people to this day, Janice, that contact me. This is 2 years later, that tell me, hey, this is going on. They want me to bust, whatever's happening or bring it to light. And I'm happy to do it. But I tell them, I was like, if you come forward and stand up, others will see that and they will join you, because it's just we're just kind of in that tough place to where, I think, like you said, it's easy to take those arrows once you have done it for a while. Pretty soon they just bounce off. But I think it's hard for these teachers to be in that environment and just every single day with their peers, which a lot, there's probably just a lot of peer pressure in that too.
It's so weird today with the mics acting up and having to, and I apologize for that. There may be some dead time in there. So I want to get you started on a question, the answer to a question that I have that I think is paramount to this whole discussion. So you, Janice Danforth, did not come out of your mother's womb with a sign becoming an activist. I mean, right? That wasn't your thing. So what made you say, at this point in time, I'm done with this nonsense. I'm going to have to get out to the forefront and start talking. So what caused you? What was the impetus that made you do that? And then you already said you get called names, and it's just kind of in your personality that you're like, I'm done with that. I don't really care. How can you help others that are, kind of scared about that? I mean, how did you kind of get over that fear? Just kind of jam on that if you can a little bit.
Okay. So what got me involved with being an activist is my kids were at Bixby, and my oldest son at the time was in 9th grade, and his government teacher was teaching things that were left leaning. It was a biased teaching that she was doing on several things. And my son is very intelligent and very engaged in politics, even back then. And so he knew what she was saying wasn't right. So he came home and we talked about it. And so I approached the principal and said, hey, here's proof. I had examples. I didn't just go in there assuming. I had examples. They said they would talk to the teacher. They did. And she said, let me know if anything else happens. We've talked to her and yada, yada. So we go and, it's another couple weeks. He comes home. Okay, Mom, there's more. And so I brought it forward again, talked to the superintendent, and let the principal know again. And the final outcome for them, now my son is extremely smart. Okay. He just graduated high school at 16 and he already has a year and a half of college. So we're not talking about, an average person. This is a very smart kid. And he actually skipped 2 grades. Okay. So that I need to share that because it's important to what their decision was. their decision was, well, we can remove him from that honors class and put him in a different class, but it would be non-honors. So they wanted to take my son, who's extremely intelligent and would be extremely bored in a non-honors, and remove him to put him in a non-honors simply because the teacher was doing what she shouldn't have done. So instead of correcting her, they wanted to penalize my child. Well, I'm a pretty feisty human being, and I said, no, thanks, we'll stay, and I will keep an eye on what's going on, and I'll just keep letting you know. And it was pretty much done. She didn't do any more. I think she realized, okay, this isn't going anywhere. So at that time, Moms for Liberty National had started a few months prior. So that summer, they were January of 21, and that summer I started thinking, well, what if I started a chapter in Oklahoma? And I kind of kept going back and forth because I felt like if I dealt with this, surely other parents have as well, with concerns, just how they just kind of placated the whole situation and myself. It just didn't sit right. So I decided to start a chapter, and it's been 2 years this fall that I started the chapter. It's grown tremendously. We've had a great reception from legislators. We are working well with teachers that let us know things that are going on, and parents let us know what's going on and how we can help them. So we give them tips on what they can do to confront situations. And as far as what to do for a parent, it's really it's vital to be engaged in the classroom and know the teacher, meet the teacher, go to the classroom, check out what's on the walls, what they're teaching your kid. In this state, as you know, Jenny, we're a parental rights state. And so you have the right to know any and all curriculum, materials, books, anything and everything you want. You have a right to have access to that. And you demand it and you get it. And if they won't give it to you, then you can go higher up. And we help parents do that. Another thing I always recommend if you're having an issue with a teacher is don't just contact one person. Always CC multiple people on there because that allows for accountability. Oftentimes they'll say, oh, just come to me or just talk to the principal. Well, there's no accountability in that. And so if you have multiple, if you're CCing on an email, the teacher, the principal, the vice principal, the counselor, the superintendent, board members, whatever, as many people as you can think of, then you're going to have action because they don't have a choice but to act because they have to be accountable to all these other people who are aware of what's going on. In fact, I had to do that with my younger son, who was being bullied. So I just took the bull by the horns and said, this is happening. This is unacceptable. And because I got many people involved, they were right on taking care of it. So you can't allow them to dictate to you what is happening. You get to tell them what's happening. And I can't stress that enough. The importance of you going in and demanding what you need done for your child. You have every right to do that and guide that situation. And there's a lot of manipulation that goes on to making parents think that they don't have the first say, but you absolutely do. So that's just a quick synopsis here.
Michael, can you kind of talk to that a little bit, because you and Janice have a whole lot in common in that particular situation, in that, you know, you have done quite a bit of what Janice is doing. And so can you and Janice kind of speak to that? How it, like, for example, so Janice, have you ever done any FOIA requests from your school? So Michael, why don't you and Janice, especially since your microphones aren't quite feeding back so badly, why don't you guys talk about FOIA requests and what that means? Because I think one of the things that we definitely want to get accomplished on this particular podcast is the fact that I know a lot of the times, you know, parents will say things like, you know, I don't even know how to get involved, or I don't even know what to do, and it's just one of me. And a lot of the times parent-teacher organizations aren't much help. I mean, that's certainly what I found. I mean, they have a very kind of a small well, when my kids were in elementary school, in public elementary school, I was in the PTA and very, engaged in the PTA for the 4 years that they were, or 3 years that they were in elementary school. Every year it was the same thing. We have to raise money for a gym. We have to raise money for a gym. We have to raise money for a computer lab, more stuff in the computer lab. And I was the only one ever sitting there at those meetings going, but you know what we really need is some Sacs and math books. How about some Sacs and math books? Because, they're in elementary school. They don't really need to know the computer yet. Let's get them on some Sacs and math books. And what ended up happening with that, even though I spent a whole year trying to get them into the classroom, was zero. Nothing happened, but we raised enough money to get a gym. So, because that's going to somehow teach them math or reading. Our priorities are so far off here. So you guys talk about how you can make that happen and get involved and make that school work for you.
Well, yeah, I'll just, I'm sure Janice's experience is similar to mine, but I'll just kind of give her a little bit of background, everybody a little background about how I got started. This was pre-COVID. I was just a dad that, I went to school when I had to go to school, or if there was some issue with one of my kids or something like that. I wasn't massively engaged with reviewing curriculum and going through, the entire classroom and looking at every single thing on the wall like I do now in the hallway. I pay attention to every little single thing now that I can. But when COVID hit and all that happened, and my board members and my administrators didn't have any answers for me. I was just asking simple questions. Hey, how are you, what are you using to make this decision to mask or lock down our kids or whatever it is, and they could never answer. So I'm like, well, I need some answers. So I just heard on a radio show one day, a guy talking about a FOIA request. I was like, well, I'm just going to send one in myself. So I just figured out how to do it. I sent one in, and it was like the walls just started, coming down at that point. I had the multiple administrators calling me, emailing me, asking me, hey, why am I even asking these questions? Why did I even do? It's like I just triggered. I just triggered them. And so anyway, through that whole process, I sent in several hundred open records requests, everything from emails to calendars to meetings to, every little thing you could think of, expenses. I wanted 1099s. I wanted to know who the cleaning crews were, whatever it was. And just through that process, I just became more and more aware of every single little situation, from the books to any other type of issue. And I think, for parents, they don't have to know how to do all this stuff. They just have to want to actually do something. And there's so many of us now, I think that it's so easy to help. And I do open records requests for all kinds of people and to all kinds of different entities in the state. But that's kind of how I got started. But I'm telling you, when I send something in now, they listen. If I need to talk to the superintendent, I can get right in and talk to the superintendent, because they know, because I've sent in enough things. I'm not messing around. I'm not wasting their time. I'm not trying to just run around in circles. I think there's an issue, or a parent or a teacher, someone has come up to me with an issue, probably real similar to you, Janice. Mm-hmm. And then I just start the process of bringing that to light.
Right. Yeah, that's vital. We need to have parents that are willing to do that. Same for me with Bixby, because I've been a noisy gong to them. They do listen. The board members they don't like me very much. There is one board member that is friendly, and so we communicate on a decent basis. But for example, I just discovered a book series that was really violent. And so I emailed the superintendent and CC'd the board and just said, hey, this is a book that I'm concerned about, with kind of where we are, the climate of today with guns and violence. And this is regarding, this book series is all about guns and violence in the schools. And I just feel like this is really inappropriate. So I would appreciate your consideration of taking it down or taking it out. And they did. They removed it. And so we, 2 years of fighting, you have to submit a, a form to get the book removed, and then it goes to a committee, and the committee, of course, is handpicked by their own people, and then they all agree to keep the book. It's this lengthy process. When I did this 2 years ago, I mean, the whole thing, I started it in October, I think. And then, well, I didn't even hear, the board didn't even hear me until February. I mean, it was a long process. And that was for 2 books. I mean, this is archaic, this process. And so that's one good thing, that as we've made more noise, not just Moms for Liberty, but other groups as well, and with Ryan Walters getting in office and being proactive, and legislators that agree and want to do the right thing, we've made a change in the book rules. And so now they cannot have sexualized material in the classroom. And so one voice can make a difference. I was one voice, and now we have a whole shift in what's happening, because there's multiple one voices across America saying the same thing, and that's how we get where we are today. And we just have to keep doing that. And we did FOIA requests at Bixby, and we discovered lots of interesting information, and that was discussed between them, and really inappropriate stuff that is really disappointing to know that people who are supposed to be defending you and fighting for you as a board member, and they are not doing that. They are deciding to favor and go with what the superintendent wants, and that's not their job. Their job is to say, we need, we're here for the people. And one instance that we did expose on that with the FOIA was they wanted to move public comment to later in the meeting so less people would hear us. And they agreed to do that. And as a board, they should have said, no, that they're citizens. They have children in this school district, and they have a right to be heard. And it's okay if other people are hearing what they have to say. But they wanted to move. The superintendent wanted it moved, and they agreed to do that. And it's really unfortunate that that's where it went to, from just wanting to be engaged in a school district and help find issues and bring them to light and work with them. That's where we got to. So, but it doesn't mean you don't do those things. You have to keep fighting and hold your battleground, because if you're doing the right thing, God will open those doors and make the right things happen. And I really believe that's true. And I believe, for me, that God opened so many doors and has allowed these changes. It's not me. I'm just a person, but he used me for his glory. And that's where we are today. And there's a lot of changes happening in the state. And luckily we have a lot of men and women that are believers, and that's helping shift things. I really believe that.
Well, and I want to expand on one thing you just said there and really make this point, because this is what I have learned more than anything from my experience over the last couple of years. Janice, you said you have to keep fighting. And I want to say, these school districts, the city councils, whatever, they win through attrition of us just quitting, of just waiting us out. So on, like, let's take like an example of an open record request or a FOIA or something like that. So, it's real easy for them to just deny what you say the first time. And then, most people are just going to say, well, they said this or that. So then they will not go ahead and fulfill the request. And I just want to add a couple little pieces of data in here. There's nothing, absolutely nothing in the Open Records Act here in Oklahoma, the statutory act, that says, because one thing these schools do, and this is true, I found in specifically school districts, not so much in state agencies or city governments or anything like that, but in school districts, they engage you by making you fill out a form that you have to sign and agree to their obnoxious fees. And there's nothing in the law that says you have to sign that form or fill it out or you're obligated. They just do that on purpose to deter people. So anyone that is interested in open records requests or anything, you don't have to do any of that. You just send in a records request right to the school. They're going to tell you have to fill out their forms. Oh, you got to go into our database and, go to this web page and agree to this form and fill it. You don't have to do any of that. So I just want to tell people, just keep going, keep asking questions, rephrase them if you have to, but don't quit, because that's how they win. They win by us just getting a no one time or maybe 2 times. And then we just say, oh, well, it's too tough. So you have to keep fighting. I agree 100%. I think that is the main key. We just stay on them, just keep going.
Right. Because when you give up, then they win. And it's definitely, they bring in, there's all these flying monkeys, I call them, that are on the outskirts that, or useful idiots, if you want to use a Marxist term. They come in and they try to attack you, to quiet you, to silence you, because they don't even know why. They're just told to do that. And so they do it. There's a group in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma educators or whatever they're called. But if you criticize their leader,
Oklahoma advocates,
them, yes. So if you criticize the leader, then they all come flying in to attack you, to silence you. And it's like, I'm sorry, but I'm allowed to voice my opinion. And then I made another comment about her recently on Twitter, and then they act like, she's a teacher. You can't do that. Well, yeah, I can. She's an activist. And if she's going to be an activist and a teacher, I get to criticize her if I want to. She's an activist and she doesn't get a free pass because she's a teacher. And that goes for all of these teachers who are activists. You don't get a free pass because you're a teacher. If you want to fight the battle, then you're going to get it right back at you. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, you're a teacher, so I better not say anything or bring up a negative. Well, I'm going to, because that's my job as a parent and as an activist on the other side. But I know I'm going to get it as well. And I expect that. So that's just part of the battle. You have to not let them try to twist things into making you the bad guy, because you bring forth the truth. And that's
well, and what's so funny on top of that, Janice, because I've been on the receiving end of a lot of hatred, criticism, and lies.
Yes, you have.
Just like all of us. But this is what's so funny. I mean, that liberal group, you would think, they're so sophisticated, they're so educated, they're philosophical. They're the biggest bullies in the world. They are
bullies.
Yeah, they have their own viewpoint. They do not have an open mind in any capacity, and it's either their way or no way. And
right.
And it's so funny to me that people just rally behind them. I mean, it's literally like a cult. I mean,
it is. It's a cult. That is the perfect word. Yes.
And it's just I want to say it's entertaining, because it is. I mean, I look at I look at Jamie's Twitter and I'm just like, what planet are you on? I mean, this is unbelievable. But
I know. And it's so funny because they have a mole in our group and we don't know who it is, but they will take snapshots of our private group and then post it in there and be like, look at what Moms for Liberty's doing. And it's like, that's okay. We don't mind. You're giving us, some media attention, and maybe the people in there that are not really believers in what they're doing are gonna switch sides. So more power to them. I'm not afraid. I'm not
well
afraid.
They take things out of context. That's the other thing.
Yeah,
they take things out of context. So that's the first thing. Just like this whole Hitler thing, Hitler. There, are you happy? I mean, it's just so, like you said before, it's absurd. And I feel like doing this and doing it at the same time, because the absurdity is just graphic. But the other thing that I learned really early on, and I love that you brought this up, because as soon as we can name it and claim it, to steal a little bit from religion, to name it and claim it, I think we win the ground again. So when we were first really, stepping out on the Common Core, and we were really out there, being big about it, the lefty teachers, who were all for Common Core and just loved Common Core and, constantly had to dig us about everything that we were doing. So I remember we had a Twitter account. We opened up a Twitter account, and we got on Twitter pretty early on. And one day I had posted something. I mean, it was just completely innocuous. I think it was just something like, you know, having a good day, Common Core isn't, or, you know, I don't know. It was just a nothing burger. Well, all of a sudden there's one comment, and then there's like 60 comments on there. And I'm like, how did this just happen? And what you're saying is right. So they have this little thing where if they don't like something that you say on social media, they go out and they message all of their friends, and then their friends just take over your Twitter stream and just spend the whole time demonizing you and just taking over your Twitter stream. Right. And I remember when that first happened to me, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What, I can't even, you know, and you get all, I got all crazy about it because I thought, I don't even know what to do at this point. And so I just quit posting for a while, you know, because I was like, well, what's even the point? And so I'll just quit posting. And that's what they want you to do. But I was going to share my screen with you about something that I posted yesterday or the day before. And I'm just doing this to make a point here.
I love the rooster in the background, by the way.
Can you really hear that?
Yeah, I love it.
It's so funny because I was hoping that when I got this unidirectional mic to try to keep that out of there, but when you open the windows when it's nice outside, I swear they come sit right under the window.
They probably do.
And do that. And you're like, stop it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you for a second so you can see what I'm talking about. And I'm doing this kind of for everybody, not just us. All right, so here was the original post. So the original post was we were advertising the fact that Riley Flack, who's another parent activist whom you know, was on our podcast on Wednesday. So we were advertising that, and this particular part right here was the live video because we go live on Twitter. We're live on Twitter right now. And this was the live video. And then this funny GIF. Because I'm like, okay, you want to play that game? Thanks for your opinion. It's gross, but thank you anyway. And I think that that's kind of the stuff that we've got to start doing, is the fact that we've got to meet these people where they are and just start being obnoxious back. I mean, if that's really the way they want to play the game, let's play the game back. I'm all for that. And, you know, she said something else later on about, the comments went on where she said something later on about, she chimed back in and she said, well, way to be rude. And I said, well, I was just following your lead.
Yeah, it's true. They're allowed to say and do whatever they want, and it's a free pass. But as you try to go and do what they do, then you're awful. You're the worst person. You hate teachers. You're whatever. Any name you can dream up, you are that. So.
And it's so bizarre too because they get so butthurt about it. It's like you do the same thing back to them that they do to you, and then they get all, well, way to be rude about it. And I'm like, wait, what? Your comment wasn't rude? I mean, these people literally, I think, they're so propagandized by our school system that, and I don't know if you saw our video with Alex Newman I think we did that last Wednesday. I think Alex was on. And he talks extensively for several minutes about how children are not being taught, but they're being I'm trying to think of the word, like Pavlov's dog, conditioned. They're being conditioned.
For sure.
And he actually, so if you try to explain to a parent that and you say, well, but your kid isn't being taught, they're being conditioned. And they say, well, that's not true. He explained it. He said they're from the very earliest time that you allow them on a screen of some kind, what they're doing is they're getting positive feedback for whatever response that that program wants to have. And they're getting negative response for any feedback that they're giving that the program doesn't want them to have. And this is why we've said for years and years and years, get your kids off screens.
Yes.
That's where so much of this is coming. And then it's just being kind of bolstered by what's going on in school. And then the teachers themselves use screens or communicate with screens. And that's a good question to ask you, because Michael has bumped up against this. Have you found any teachers communicating with students individually on apps?
I mean, I've heard that that's pretty normal. That's a pretty common thing. I mean, I don't know that my kids know, but they're not on. I don't let them be on that stuff. But I know that that's a pretty common thing. There's my kid. You're on TV. So
he's just checking on you on your screen. Yeah. That's what he's doing. He's checking your screen time.
But I know that's pretty common.
Yeah. Well, what I want to kind of add in there a little bit, I think, Jenny, that there are a lot of kind of apps through the school districts that allow, teachers and students to have communication. But I think where Jenny was going more is I have uncovered EP or district employees in Edmond Snapchatting students, which, is completely unacceptable, because there's only one reason why you'd use an app like Snapchat, which, is to hide your entire trail of what you're doing. But
right.
but that goes back to
I think that's pretty common, actually, that type of behavior. That's becoming friends with their teachers, which just leads down to all sorts of paths that is not good. There should be a boundary there, and it should be enforced strongly by the administration and the board, but it's not.
Well, and I think, when I look back at when I was in school, you basically showed up to school. The teacher was the authority in the classroom. I mean, nobody's surprised when I say this. I got SWATs in middle school like 3 times. I mean, we had discipline. I mean, the teacher was here, you were over here. There was never any of this. I think the only time that ever was at all kind of muddied is with our music. Was in middle school, and our music teacher was really super sweet, and she had our choral group over to her house several times. But the parents met the teacher, and the parents knew that we were going over to her house for lunch, and she just had these little luncheons, for our choral group. But the parents knew who the teacher was. There was and this didn't happen like at school, I mean, the parents were well aware of everything that was going on. And the only time outside of that, when I was in high school, was our drama teacher. I mean, we did all kinds of stuff with our drama teacher, off campus and whatever. But then we were, 17 and 18 years old when we were doing that too. So, pretty much adults. But that's not what happens now. And one of the ladies that we had on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, Denise Roberts, she told me a story one time that she was just, I literally could not even believe. And she said that in her area, her oldest daughter was in with this group of kids. And she said the parents would just drop these kids off at these parents' houses for sleepovers. They didn't know who the parents were. They'd never met the parents before. They hadn't even talked to them on the phone. And they're just dropping their kids off at their houses. And I'm like, where did we get to the point that parents think it's not their job to raise their kids?
And I think you hit the nail. I mean, parents, the school system has slowly over time gotten more and more control and more ability to oversee the child. And the parents think, because they're both working and they're busy, they're like, okay, this is great. This is helpful. This is helpful. Well, we're to the point now where they want to implement community schools. And I mean, you know that, Jenny, we're fighting against those. They exist in Oklahoma, but we've been pushing back hard enough that we've at least prevented bills from being into place for those to be normal. But the average person just thinks, oh, well, that's helpful. That's a great thing. Well, it's not a great thing when the government is the one raising your kid. We don't want that. We want to have a distinct line between the family, the nuclear family, and the government. And that is blurring more and more every year. And parents need to start waking up and realizing that the more control they give away, the less control they have. And now your kid is being raised by who knows who, and who knows what is going to be infiltrated in their heads, which are very vulnerable at those young ages to be brainwashed into thinking things, which is why we have all these social justice warriors, and we have a problem. So we're at the point in America where the parents who know better need to start standing up and speaking up, because if we don't do it now, this country is gone. So we are literally in the last chance of this generation to save where America's headed. And I know it sounds dramatic, but it's completely the truth.
Well, see, I'm beyond. I think the country's gone. I think it's getting it back at this point. So. Oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Isn't that fun when you do that on a podcast and it's live and you're like, oops. But I think where I was going was the fact that, no, it's gone. Michael, Michael, save me. Help me.
Well, I think I want to. That I see, Janice, is parents have just been so conditioned, by this. This is where it really started. You look at you even look at business. Okay, look at how, like, in my opinion, cell phones have killed like the original face-to-face business communication. Someone in an office with a suit and having, a personal assistant, taking phone, that whole era of everything is gone. The entire personal communication side has just been completely disrupted. And now that people have so much instant everything from their phones, it's so easy to not have to be a parent and then just hand your phone or an iPad or a game console or, whatever to your kid for 5 minutes. Well, pretty soon that little 5-minute episode turns into 5 hours and you didn't even realize that. But I do want to make another point. One of our moms here had a pretty good conversation with our director of human resources or whatever at the school. And he told her in a conversation that the second that the school started feeding the kids for free and transporting the kids, they became their kid. They became the district's kids. They're not our kids anymore. And that's literally their mentality, is they're the ones, that's with the child all day long. They're feeding the kids. They're teaching the kids. They're taking care of the kids. They're dropping the kids off. And the parents are so, I don't, I try to give parents the benefit of the doubt.
it's hard times. We're all just working to try to survive. But at the same time, we can't negate our responsibility to be a parent and take care of our kids, because they are ultimately our kids, and everything that happens to them, good or bad, we have to take responsibility for it. But I think it's kind of like when I talk to all my kids, dad friends, and things like that, they can tell you everything about every stat for their favorite football or basketball team, or this or that, or the mom's talking about, this person's Twitter or reality TV, or, this celebrity or that. But they're so engaged in that they don't even realize that their kid in 5th grade or 4th grade is at a 50% reading level. I mean, that to me, that is so upsetting. But the school,
you mean more like a 23% reading level?
Yeah, I'm telling you about the best schools in Oklahoma, 50%. I'm erring on the good side. I'm trying to give them some credit. But to me, that's where, if you had a very responsible board, if I was a board member, I lost my race by just a handful of votes. If I was a board member, I would be on my administrators to say, I want, weekly, monthly, quarterly reports going out to these parents. I want them to know exactly where their kids are in education, because that's why they're here at school. They're here for academics, and that's it.
Right. Yeah. And to speak to the food situation, the feeding at school, I actually went and spoke in Sallisaw a couple weeks ago, and some liberal people showed up to listen, and of course they were there really to argue. They weren't there to learn. And one of them made a comment. She was a teacher, and she said, well, they always have an excuse for why these types of things are their job. And I told her, I said, it isn't your job to feed them. And she was just that I would say that. And she said, well, they need to have a full stomach to be good learners, so we need to do that. And I said, well, it isn't your job. Your job is to educate them. Your only job is to educate them, not to do anything else. And she said, well, there's poor kids who need. And I said, yeah, there absolutely are poor kids. And you know whose job that is the church. It's the church's job, and they've failed. Their job is to take care of the people who are poor, widowed, etc. And the church has allowed, as well as the parent, the church has allowed the school system to take charge of their responsibilities as well. So there's multiple at faults here. And people just need to realize, and you need to understand, because they always have that the people who are going to defend all these things in the education world, they always have, they sound like good reasons. You want kids to starve is what they would think when you argue against that. So people need to be educated on what your rebuttal is. Understand why it's not the job of the school to do X, Y, Z, and be able to back that up, because they will always have a comeback. I mean, it'll just keep coming. And the bottom line is the job of the school is, their only job is to educate, period. They shouldn't be doing any other things.
That was awesome. That will become a clip, by the way, because that was awesome. There was when Joy Hoffmeister was elected the first time, we actually suggested people vote for her, because at the time she was better than Janet Barisi, who had given us Common Core and data collection and everything that Obama was, kind of dishing out. So we were like, well, there has to be something better. I mean, we're not getting anywhere where we are right now. We're still feeding into the federal line, which is the other problem that we have. We can't seem to understand federalism, which means that we're a state, they're the feds, we do what we want, end of discussion. So we still can't quite grasp that. But she put me, Joy did, put me on I was like a parent advisory board or whatever. And of course, I was the only conservative on the parent advisory board. And I remember saying something to that group one time, because they were talking about, what do you think, what could we do to save money? What do you think would be, really helpful? And I said, well, honestly, I think the best thing that we could do would be to partner with churches around schools and have them feed the kids that can't afford to feed themselves. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be, because people don't understand that a lot of those, the catering services, if you will, that come into schools are run by like Sodexo. And what does Sodexo use to keep everybody's account straight? They use your thumbprint. So you've already got your kid's thumbprint in a system just to get a crappy school lunch, and people don't understand that there's just data collection in a school, from the moment you even think about entering to the door to the school, from the point that you leave the door, and on whatever computer you have, that the Google fed computer that your kid is using. I mean, this whole system of publicly funding education is so far out of control and usurping so many of the rights of not just parents, but children as well, through the data collection that they use. And it's just shocking that people don't seem to do, like what you just said. They can't put two and two together to figure that out. And I love what you said. You're exactly right. We need to start feeding these people specific reasons why taxpayer-funded public education is not working the way it should be right now, and how we can actually change that. That's the only way. But then you have to have parents who are like you, who are willing to stand up to these bullies and say, bully me all you want, I don't really care. It doesn't bother me,
Yeah, I mean, we just have to get to that place, and hopefully as the light shines on all of this darkness, more people wake up and eventually get and do something about it. But usually something has to happen to their child for them to really wake up. But I'm on some groups with parents in Bixby, and I keep seeing a lot of them saying, I'm taking my kid out. I mean, people are done. There's a lot of bullying. That's a huge problem. That's everywhere. I mean, that's not Bixby, is just like everywhere else. But it's just out of control. I mean, there's so much out of control, and it's because we are tied to federal dollars, and all of those federal dollars dictate what the schools can and can't do. So we no longer have discipline, thanks to Obama and his restorative justice program. So it really limits and ties the hands of the schools, but they will continue to do that because they want the money. They don't want to let go of that money. And people need to realize that that's the reason behind why there's so much bullying and the lack of discipline, is because they really can't do anything about it. And it's all tied to federal funds. I mean, period.
Well, that was one of the things that we had a belief when Common Core was instituted, that whole thing was to just run good teachers out of classrooms, because if you could take away the best thing for a person who really loves to teach, is the fact that it's almost an art form. You get to use different things. You get to really, enjoy what you're doing in your classroom. It was the most fun I ever had. I mean, it could be the worst day you ever have, but most of my best days ever were, in the classroom teaching kids. And the other thing that I think that they wanted to do with that restorative justice program is get those good teachers out of there, because if there's no discipline and they're being thrown chairs at, or kids get to, call them whatever they want to, or spit on them or whatever, then those teachers aren't going to stay there. And so then you get those good teachers out, and then what do? Then they cry, oh, we need teachers. Oh my gosh, we have a teacher shortage. I just go, I mean, it's really, okay, so exactly, you have a teacher shortage. Oh gosh, I'm so shocked about that. Clutching pearls.
But then they blame, the funny thing with the teacher shortage is they blame parents like me, that we're the reason, because we're bringing up all these issues, and we're, the teachers just can't do it anymore. And that is the funniest thing in the world to me, because We do not go after teachers. We support teachers. We want to be arm in arm with them. They have the kids, my kids, all the parents' kids. We want to work alongside them. What we're trying to do is actually help the teachers by exposing all these things, and they're all brainwashed to think that we're harming them, and we're not. We're their friend, and they don't.
Well, yeah, that is just complete spin, Janice. And I'll tell you, the very conservative teachers that have been around for a long time that contacted me, they said, look, and they're at those testing levels in public education. So they were like, if I could just actually teach these kids
Right.
how to read, how to do math, I have so many programs that I have to go through, all these hoops I got to go through, all the stuff I got to go through, all the different things on the computer and all these different check boxes. If I could just have a lesson plan and actually teach these kids, I could. And then they also tell me that they are so micromanaged, not just from one administrator, but from multiple administrators, even at the district level, not even, in their own school. So we're talking upper level managers or administrators, I should say, micromanaging these fifth grade, teachers to a level that, they're only there because they love kids and they love to teach, and they've been teaching for 20 plus years and they know how to teach. But they're just at the point that they just can't even, they can't even take it. So that is just there's such a spin on, well, we're the ones that's doing all this to them. And, it's like that everywhere. So I agree. But I did want to give a little dish for the good teachers and tell you exactly what they have told me.
Yeah, and I know that's true. And it's ultimate gaslighting. I mean, the administrators and school districts, always say, oh, we need more money. We need more money. No, you don't. I mean, you can look at Chicago. They get like 23, somewhere around there, 26,000 per pupil. And they have like zero proficiency rates on a lot of their schools. I just read an article about it. I mean, the more money isn't going to be the solution. They're misusing the money they have. And what I always would like to know and have teachers why are you okay with the fact that you have to buy stuff for your own classroom? Why don't you have money from the administrators to give you more money that you have to either get it yourself or ask parents to get it for you? I mean, there's so much gaslighting that goes on. It's really like an abusive relationship. The districts are the abuser and the teachers are abused. And if you know anything about abusive relationships, they get so manipulated into thinking that they're the problem or that they deserve what they get, that they start believing it. And they need to start standing up and saying, okay, that's true. Why is there all this money, but I'm having to buy my own supplies for my classroom? That's absurd. I mean, TPS, as an example, their budget is almost $800 million a year. And you're telling me that those teachers don't have money to buy for them to get to fulfill what they need in their classroom? I mean, that's just ridiculous. So why are we not asking, where's the money for the teachers? Why are parents and teachers having to provide all that stuff? And these are the questions that people need to start asking instead of willingly just going and buying the stuff and fulfilling it. They need to start asking, wait a minute, why is the district not providing this? Why? I already pay all this money in taxes. And now they want more money, and then they want bonds on top of that. I mean, when you start, it's so corrupt. I mean, the money, it is, I say this as of the last like 6 months, the school system is a money laundering scheme. And I believe it to be true. It is a complete money laundering scheme. All these organizations and associations make so much money off of the districts, which is us, the taxpayer. And then they cry, the district said, oh, we don't have money. You have to still help do all these other things. I mean, it's disgusting, honestly. If you start digging deeper into all that stuff, it's
well, I'm a finance guy and I love that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you, during my campaign, we received an anonymous letter from a former district employee, district accounting person. And they said, look, if you get in there, you need to look at this and this and this and this, because this is all wrong. You can blow this whole thing up. Unfortunately, I didn't. And we tried to pursue that, but we've been shut down through legal means multiple times. But I agree 100%. It is money laundering to the 10th degree.
Oh yeah.
Well, and beyond that, it's even cronyism. I mean, there's a huge cronyism aspect to it, because you were mentioning bonds a second ago. We, in our town, we have a person who is a contractor who lives in the town. Well, actually, he lives on the other side of the town, but a huge property. He's a contractor. He helps the school go out and pimp their bonds, gives them money to, well, why? Because he's a contractor for the school. It makes him money if the bonds win. Yeah. So he doesn't care whether his, taxes are going to go up on his property or not, because he's going to make a windfall profit off of the, overbilling the school for whatever bond project they have. And that's just the way business is done. And I just guarantee it. And we were talking about, schools and costs and that kind of stuff. Here's your big issue that's come into play in about the last 5 or 10 years. When I was, now granted, I graduated from high school in 1981, so I go back a ways. We never had paras in the class, paraprofessionals in the classroom. I never had anybody when I was teaching in the late 90s and early 2000s who would run copies for me. I did all of that myself. But now, one teacher in a classroom is not the norm. One teacher in the classroom with a paraprofessional, with a person who's an aide who can run all of their stuff, and we're paying for all three of those people, not just the teacher. So you can see, and how does that paraprofessional help that student unless they are doing something for their IEP, for a kid's IEP or something like that? Otherwise, if they're just moving kids around or taking them to lunch or running copies or whatever, they're not helping the kid learn in the classroom. And yet, look at the line here.
Right.
Students that change, here's the big thing. So the number of students in the system have grown 8%. While principals and assistant principals have grown 37%, and administrative staff, like what we were just talking about, is 88%.
Yeah.
Why aren't we prioritizing kids here?
Right. There's something wrong. People just need to see. And that's the other funny thing is, if you show, I've learned this too, you can show them statistics, you can show them proof. They will still do this. They don't want to know. And it just baffles me. I don't know how when someone doesn't even want to see truth and you show it to them, they still deny it. You can't fix it. It's the only term I can think of.
Well, this has been years ago now. I got into, significant trouble on our Facebook page. This was during one of the teacher walkouts, so it may have been 2016, and it was during the teacher walkouts, and I'm like, okay, enough. Really, we don't have enough smart boards, we don't have enough Google computers, we don't have enough iPads, we don't have enough. I said, the ability of kids to read proficiently and do math proficiently is falling, while the amount of money that you get is increasing.
Yeah.
If you want proof that you don't need all of that garbage, look at homeschoolers. You can teach in a closet if you want to with the Bible, which is basically what, our forebears did. They taught their kids using the Bible in front of the fireplace. That was the way it worked. And you would have thought I literally said that we should, line up and dispose of all of teachers or something, right. Because I had a million posts. How dare you say that teachers aren't important? How dare you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
you missed it. You missed the whole point here.
So I have lost a lot of my, I don't feel particularly sorry for teachers anymore. If you're a good teacher in the system and you can't band together and stand up against this, I'm sorry. I don't feel bad for you. I mean, I really don't, because you are our only hope, Obi-Wan
Right.
Kenobi. And if you guys won't do that, then I don't know where else we can go to. So,
Right.
Sorry. And then if you're in it because, like some TikTok I saw the other day, talking about how he had become a she and how great their and supportive their school staff was for that. This is all nonsense and has nothing to do with my kid adding 2 and 2 to get 4.
Right. Exactly. And this is what I like to say to people too, when your school has a 90th percentile in reading, then we can talk about all the other stuff. When you get there, let's talk about the other stuff.
But that's what I said about sports too. I'm like, you know what? But here's the other thing. When you have our legislature coming and saying, we've made the most significant investment in public education. So basically what you're doing is you're telling all of these schools that suck, here's some more money to suck more.
Right. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's time to say there's something wrong and we need to figure out what it is. And we really, here's what I keep saying too, is we need a superintendent with a good board that sits and is willing to do the right thing and be an example. And it may not be Oklahoma, it may be in another state. That's fine, but we need one district that says we are going to do things differently. We are not going to take federal money. We are going to do social emotional learning. We're not going to do critical race theory. We're not going to feed the kids, whatever it is. Here's the money we have, and we're going to be teaching them academics. And if we can have a school that does that and has that example, then I think others will realize it.
Yeah, but that would shatter the paradigm of, it's funny. Jenny said a little bit ago, she said publicly funded education. I mean, I think we need to tweak that a little bit, Jenny. It's publicly funded socialism. And that's the point. They're all these systems and all these programs in the school, they're literally made to just make these kids subservient, make them little automatons, make them little employees, make them to where, they can't think. And, because Janice, and one thing that just drives me up the wall is there is no financial education in these schools in any capacity. I mean, these kids know nothing about money, how money works, how debt works, business, accounting, business ethics, entrepreneurism, the entire gamut of what it takes once you get out of school. That's what you really need to know. That is not taught in any, and it just drives me up the wall. Like, I mean, I can't even imagine. But to me, this is a socialist system, and it's only going to get worse because that's what socialism does. And I think, me just looking, we look at a lot of investments 10 years, 15 years down the road. And what I see coming is the replacement of these teachers, because things are getting progressively worse. Scores are getting worse. They're spending more money for less results. So what are they going to do? They're going to start utilizing technology even more. You're going to have more, in the next 5 years, 10 years, you're going to have technology completely replace all of these teachers, in my opinion, in one way or another. And if they would understand that, they could turn the entire thing around themselves and say, hey, we're getting back to creating the best possible education, academic experience we can. But it's so funny that you don't even have a single school that's leading that charge in, like what you said, because it wouldn't be that hard for one school to really say, hey, we're throwing all that stuff out. We're going to have our priority here is to have our kids above 90% in all of these core areas. And we're going to see what these kids can do.
And kids are smart. We can get there. There's no reason that a school cannot get there. There's no reason. They just have to cut out all the other crap, and they're not willing to do that. And it's because of money. I mean, social emotional learning alone is a money maker like nobody's business. I mean, last year it was like $2.7 billion That's how much money went into social emotional learning. And then we have bullying out the yin yang. We've got discipline issues. Oh, but social emotional learning is working. You know, they do their own studies to figure out that it's working, and yet you can see the results that it's not working, that we have more issues in that developmental area than ever before. So it's
Well,
not, it's a fail.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that too, because that was another thing that Alex Newman talked about on our podcast with him. He said, you know, the more we talk about like suicide, for example, the higher the suicide rate goes. Because when you're talking to a child and you're saying, don't commit suicide, you're also saying, here's an option.
Yeah. Well,
and they've done quite a bit of research on this for this book, The Crimes of the Educators. And they basically show in that book that the more that you introduce stuff like this, the worse it gets. And so then they say, well, this isn't working. We need to do more. And the more they do, the worse it gets. And it just ends up going, it's like to infinity and beyond.
Yeah, right. Well, and now we have that OPNA survey, the House Bill 1103, that is now mandated to be given to students across the state every other year for 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th. And Senator Hayes was part of that. And I actually met with him, and, you know, because I was critical of it. And he was mad that I criticized it publicly. And I said, well, have you seen this thing? It's a nightmare. It takes kids 45 minutes to take this survey. So there are 45 minutes taken away of learning. And it's all these questions, and it's all about stuff like that. Suicide, drugs. Do you have a good home? Where do you live? Do you live in a car? Do you live in a house? You know, some of the drugs on there, there's something listed this year and I don't even know what it is. I even tried to look it up online and couldn't find it. So you're going to give this and offer this question to the 8th graders? I'm an old lady and I don't even know what it is by even looking it up. Well, now you just planted all these seeds in these kids' heads for things they maybe never even thought about before. Not to mention the older kids on those surveys, they just fill it out thinking it's funny, right? Yep, I do heroin 5 times a week. My kids have told me this. That's what they do. So it's not even accurate information. But now we have a law in place that they have to give it, where it used to be voluntary. And now every kid in every other year will be taking this stupid survey. That drives me complete. I hate this survey, and I really, really want to try to figure out a way to reverse that bill, because it's horrific.
Well, we need to reverse several bills, and the other one is the tax credit, voucher that they passed last year too. But let's not get into that, because we're going to have to close up here, because it's an hour and 17 minutes, and I know we all have other things to do. But explain that OPN survey. I honestly haven't even heard of this. Explain more about it.
So OPNA, and it's I forget what it stands for, but you can go OPNA survey, and you can type that in, and it'll actually bring you to a website. And it's Oklahoma Health that puts it on. They go
Oklahoma Prevention Needs Assessment.
You got it. And
yes.
Yes. So it's
okay. I'll screen share this again, so you can see it and everybody else can see it. Hold on one second. Let me get it up here for everybody. Okay, there it is. You can see it now. So this is the Oklahoma Prevention Needs Assessment by.
So it used to be voluntary by the school, and my son, I had opted my older son out of it. My younger son, I didn't ever see a email that it was being offered, and I had told him not to do any surveys. And then he sent me a text and he's like, Mom, they're giving me a survey. And I said, well, don't take it. And he goes, well, you're not going to like this one. Well, on it had all these what gender. And there was a long list of probably 20 different genders. And I learned the hard way. I saved the original on a PDF. So I have the original one. They've since deleted it off this website, but I have the originals. They did remove the that question. Another question that I had an issue with was what were you assigned? What sex were you assigned at birth? And I said, nope, that's not okay either, because that is just leading them to think that, these kids, that they can change their sex, which is not possible. And it's filled with questions. Do you sniff paint? There's all kinds of crazy questions on there, but it is now mandatory thanks to House Bill 1103. So.
Okay, so this is from Tulsa County too. This is the OPNA summary dashboard. Gender, race, ethnicity, substance use, 30-day lifetime substance use, risk and protective factors, perceived availability of guns, of drugs, favorable to drug use. Yeah, this is ridiculous, and they mandated this.
Yeah, they mandated it.
Family conflict.
Yeah, it's very invasive. I cannot stand this thing. It just sends
Oh gosh. Okay, well, I need to let you guys know of something. So this says religiosity. This says belief in moral order. Okay, so there is a federal law, the PPRA, the Parents and Pupils' Rights, and it's a federal law, and it says that if you, that any survey that is paid for by federal money cannot ask anything about religion or politics. It just can't ask that. So the way they've gotten around the PPRA, and it's funny because Epic Times just wrote a big story about this very same thing about PPRA and FERPA and how they're just ridiculous. They just don't even work anymore, even though those were laws to protect children in public schools and parents, and they just don't even work anymore. But the PPRA, basically, you could file a suit against your school under PPRA if you got anything like what we just saw on this screen, because it's against the law to do, against the PPRA. But how they've gotten around it is, if you'll notice, this was administered by the Oklahoma Health Department. So it's really a federal survey, but they give it underneath the Oklahoma Health Department, and that gets them out of the federal laws. Do you see how that works? So tell me, if you really loved children and you wanted to care and protect them, would you be finding ways and loopholes around laws that would protect them?
Good point. Yeah.
So I think we need to think about that.
Yeah, it's a good spot to end.
Yeah. Are you saying you want to get off, Janice?
I'm just saying. Well, my bladder is getting to the point.
Yeah, the coffee in the morning. Well, Janice, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. For all of you who kind of watched us through the troubles that we had with our audio, I'm so sorry, but thank you for hanging in there. And thank you all to all of our sponsors as well. We really appreciate you every single day, and you allow us to be able to do this. So thank you so very much. Janice, I just want you to know before you get off of here, I'm pretty sure you're not Hitler.
I'm not.
And I'm pretty sure Moms for Liberty is actually doing good things in the community. And so thank you so very much, Janice, for being one of those moms that's standing up and doing the good thing for the community.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
No, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you being Janice. And thank you so much for everything you do in your community.
Thank you.
God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right, bye. Boy, the mic issue was a real problem today. I just have no idea what the whole issue was, but I keep having to mute you so that I can talk, and you have to keep muting me so that you can talk, and it's just, I don't know what happened there, but we do hope that it won't happen again, and we're very sorry that it happened today, so please excuse us for that. Michael, do you have anything that you want to?
Well, I think it's important to recognize people like Janice for just showing up and doing what other people don't want to do. I mean, literally, that's what she's doing. She's doing the things that other people just don't really want to do. And yeah. I think she needs to be applauded. And obviously she has been recognized by Moms for Liberty, which she should be. But ultimately, you know, she's just one of us. She's just another parent who said, hey, enough is enough. That's it. I'm going to do something. And that's all it takes. It just takes, you know, a couple more of those Janices. And then all of a sudden you get a big enough impact. You have a big enough footprint that things truly do change. So I applaud her. I'm happy to be on here with her. I'm honored to be on here with her. And I think it's important that people just realize all you have to do is just start, you know, just start asking questions, just start being accountable, start kind of just moving that ball, you know, down the line there so we can, you know, try to get something. But ultimately my hat's off to her because she's doing the things other people just do not want to do. And sometimes that's just the only way things get done.
Yeah. And I think I want to point out too, before we get off of here, that I loved, you know, what she said about she gets attacked. I mean, you've been attacked. I've been attacked. We've all, I mean, my gosh, I was called a colonialist and a seditionist. And I mean, I can't even tell you the number of things that I've been called. I'm like, what? I mean, really? Most of these things, I mean, you do have some crazy stuff where the FBI is getting involved and doing things that, you know, just completely out of the scope of our Constitution. And I'm not saying that that's not a frustration or a worry. And yes, there are instances of people losing their jobs, which they shouldn't, because you're allowed the First Amendment in this country. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I'm not trying to wipe all of that stuff under the rug, because that is the biggest indication of an authoritarian country or a communist country. And that's kind of where we're going if we're not already there. But that doesn't mean that the majority of the time, you just turning around and doing what I did to that girl on Twitter, you know, which is just kind of going, really, it's going to hurt you. It doesn't hurt you. I mean, I really do believe that what we in my generation were told by our parents, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never hurt you. I mean, we all know that people can say things that hurt your feelings, but for the most part, you know, they're just words, and it's how you take them. And if you just decide for yourself that they're not going to get you, and you're not going to let them bother you. And I will say this, I rely on Jesus a lot myself, because when I get things like that and I let him get under my skin, I immediately have to go throw myself on my knees and pray to try to get rid of that, you know, because it's not something that's helpful, and it's not going to help my purpose and the purpose that God put me here to fulfill. So I'm telling you, you guys can do this. It's not, you can do it. You just have to, you know, make yourself do it and not get bothered by it. So that's my 2 cents for the day.
100%. Right there with you.
All right. Well, Michael, it was good to be on with you again today, as it always is when we're on together. And thank you so much for being with us. And thank you, everybody who tuned in and hung with us. And Michael and I are going to be back very soon. We're not sure if it'll be later on today that we'll release it or not, but we do have a special video that we're going to be doing this afternoon that we will be releasing, and we will be releasing it to some of our to our Patreon channel, quite a bit of it to our Patreon channel. So if you're not a Patreon member, Reclaim Oklahoma Parent Empowerment, please look us up on Patreon and join us. And we will see you again next Wednesday. I'm looking next Wednesday, the 20th. And on next Wednesday, the 20th, I'm not sure who will be on, but we will be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. So please mark your calendar and join us in the morning. And thank you so much for being with us.